Any question? I guess, has anyone not eaten at a food truck? Never?
What? You know where you're going after this.
Well, food trucks, I guess 2 out of, say, 35, something like that. Food trucks are incredibly popular these days. Do not get the memo. And they're popular for a variety of reasons. Those reasons are sometimes economic and other times sort of riding on the foodie wave. The economy's bad, chefs are out of work, they're looking for a new thing to do. People who would start restaurants maybe can't afford it, so they're doing the food truck thing instead. It's a more economical way to start a business. So there is, in DC, is a great example of this, sort of a food truck revolution going on. But there's also a sort of regulatory intervention revolution going on, which is in many ways unfortunate and in some ways actually good. So I'm going to talk about that, and I'll talk about DC first because that's where we are and that's where I eat. That's where my mouth is. So I have some experience in this, and then I'll talk more about national issues, and I'll try to get that all done in 4.5 minutes. There are 4 sort of main players in DC that, as pertains to food trucks. There's the DCRA, which is the sort of regulatory agency that oversees food trucks. There's the DC Food Truck Association, which is a lobbying association that has its members, the lobster truck and the barbecue bus and others that are members. There's the Restaurant Association of Metro Washington, which is sort of plays the role of foil in all of this. They represent brick and mortar restaurants, actually a pretty small number of brick and mortar restaurants, but they wield some, I think, outsized power, and they oppose the food trucks for reasons I'll explain. And then business improvement districts, which are sort of nebulous. I guess there's like the DuPont Circle and the Logan Circle and other business improvement districts, and they play a role also. Some of them encourage food trucks and make it easy for them to operate there, and some of them not so much. I'd like to add to the list of players, because I can do this because I'm up here, Keep Food Legal, which is my nonprofit. And I've written some articles for Reason on food trucks. I've done a bunch of research that I presented at places. I presented at the University of Chicago Law School this past weekend, and at Rochester Institute of Technology and other places. I'm actually teaching a course at American University, which I know you all want to take it, but it's booked, in the fall on social media and food and how that's sort of changing the way that we eat. So those are sort of the things going on in DC, and I'm going to get into some of the issues, and you see them in DC, and we see them nationally, and then talk about some potential solutions as we see it. So the Institute for Justice, which I mentioned, released a report in, I think, July, say, on food trucks, and they've done a bunch of work, a bunch of research in this area, and they pointed out 5 different kinds of restrictions that have gone into place. There are bans, which I think are most obvious. You can't have a food truck. I think Rochester, New York, actually has a ban on food trucks operating within its borders. There are zones. So, and there's an attempt actually in DC right now, it appears, to enforce that sort of thing, which would be, say, you can park here, but you can't park there. There are food truck-free zones, or there are food truck-friendly zones. There are proximity rules, which say you can't park a food truck within, say, 200 feet of a restaurant, 1,000 feet of a restaurant, and I'll get into some California regulation, a bill that just got shot down, thankfully, that would have prevented people from parking initially within 1,500 feet of a public school, which actually had a school lunchtime, and was reduced to 500 feet, and then thankfully died in flames before it could ever be even introduced.
Wasn't it good? You think the students run out
No,
1,500 feet to get the food
Exercise, yeah. The horror. There's also this amazing, you've probably all heard of it, the ice cream truck rule in DC, which says that you can't pull over your vehicle until there's a queue, there's a line formed of customers, which is sort of different, it's slow down and grab some people to play. So it used to be that ice cream trucks, and I guess maybe they still do this, you know, would play their annoying music, and kids would in the Pavlovian way run over and line up. But now the food trucks use social media. They use Twitter. This is why Twitter is so important in DC and elsewhere, because if you're a moving restaurant, it helps if your customers know where you're going to be. And so people actually line up, you know, the lobster truck, I use them because I've written about them, will say, we're going to be at such and such, Farragut Square at 11:45. Of course, they're not going to be there until 12, but everyone lines up at 11:40 so they can be first, and they're hence a line, so they can actually do business. And then there are duration restrictions, which say that, I still have a minute left, which say that you can only park for a particular period of time, whether it's the parking meter, and that's 2 hours. Arlington, Virginia actually had a 5-minute rule at one point, which thankfully has been lifted, which, yeah, so you could, you know, pull over and that was it. And then you could roll slowly while helping the customer. So there's actually, although IG didn't talk about it, there's a horrific, what's that?
Ghost riding the food trucks.
Right, exactly. There's a terrible rule in Chicago which says that you can't cook on your truck. So essentially they're caterers. You know, they cook all their food in this place and then they bring the food out. And one of my fellow panelists, because we talked about this in Chicago, pointed out that that's, you know, a serious health risk, because you essentially have this food which can sit on the truck for hours and hours, and you can't make a fresh taco on the streets of Chicago. And they also have radius restrictions. I mean, it's an ugly situation there. So those are sort of the issues and what are some solutions. I have a law journal article which is coming out after my edits are due tomorrow. Within the next, I would say, 6 weeks or so. And I've sort of boiled down the solutions to, well, a free market would be the perfect solution. Just let everyone operate, drive their trucks where they want to, and that's it. But in the absence of that, I've come up with this sort of suffix of ATE. So there's advocate, associate, litigate, and real estate. Advocate means, obviously, you know, fight for your rights. Associate means, like the DC Food Truck Association has done, establish associations, either strength in numbers, and, you know, fight for your rights together. Litigate, I think, is obvious. I'm a lawyer. I probably should have put that first, because I may think of that first. And then real estate means that there's a battle for public space, but there's also private space. And like DC has Truckaroo, which is I guess a leased space where all the trucks can go, and it's sort of a safe haven where they can all sell at the same time. We argue in our article that these sort of truck lots, we call them, are the future of vending. That may or may not be the case, but in any event, trucks should be allowed to operate in public space as freely as possible. And I just want to, one thing you noted, I don't want to let this skip by, but you said about health inspection. The trucks are actually inspected in the same way as a brick and mortar restaurant. It's the sort of the location and other things that differentiate them in terms of their treatment by the state.